Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for standing by, and welcome to today's event, the Hackett Group 2014 Payroll Sourcing Optimization Study. If you're experiencing technical difficulties joining the WebEx session, please dial 1-866-229-3239. That number again is 1-866-229-3239. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few tools you'll be able to use throughout today's web seminar. To ask a question at any time during the event, please go to the Q&A panel in the lower right of your screen, type your question in the box, and then click the Send button. Please keep the default send to all panelists. Your question will go to the panelists and will be answered at the end of the presentation as time permits. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded. I'd now like to turn the conference over to Felicia Cheek. Felicia, please go ahead.
Great, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining our webcast this morning or this afternoon. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone that participated in the Payroll Sourcing Optimization Study, and I'll take this opportunity to also introduce myself. Again, for those of you that do not know me, my name is Felicia Cheek. I work for the Hackett Group, and I lead our Global Time to Pay Advisory Program. I have been in consulting for more than 20 years, primarily as an advisor or an internal consultant for payroll. My role at the Hackett Group, again, has me leading over 100 companies with their payroll strategy and really helping them achieve top performance in payroll. So I would like, again, to share with you the results of the study today. So our agenda for today is we'll start with a quick overview of the Payroll Sourcing Optimization Study, and then we'll look at strategic outsourcing. We'll also look at sourcing and system capabilities. We'll look a little bit at productivity and payroll. We'll look at the cost and FTEs, specifically focusing on technology based on your sourcing solution. We'll look at challenges. We'll also look at the future of payroll solutions. We'll do a quick summary, and then at the very end of the presentation, we do have demographics to give you an idea of the participants, or a profile, I should say, of the participants in the performance study. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the study. We did the study to identify benefits and challenges of different payroll solutions. We also wanted to illuminate critical practices while showing how effectively these practices are being applied. We also wanted to highlight key delivery practices across current and trending payroll processing platforms. And finally, we wanted to empower payroll professionals with insight necessary to maximize your current and or future system capabilities. So some of the high-level observations from the Payroll Sourcing Optimization Study are detailed here. The first thing is sourcing. As we looked at sourcing, we saw payroll leaders really recognize strategic outsourcing as a key tool to enable payroll resources to focus on more analytical and process improvement type activities. And so when we talk about strategic sourcing, that's doing those activities that are important to your organization internally, and then outsourcing those activities that are not as important to the success or the in line with the goals and objectives of your organization. We found that 69% of the time, tax filing and payments is outsourced. It is the most common sub-process for outsourcing. And then from a functionality perspective, really focusing on customizations in payroll, we see that they have not gone away, and they're common among all technology platforms. The question is, are the customizations necessary? Are we customizing for the right reasons? And we found that 66% of customizations are to accommodate unique business requirements. The third observation centers around productivity. And what we found is regardless of the solution, payroll leaders still spend a big amount of time, in fact, 50% of their time on day-to-day payroll activities. And what we mean by that is we really don't have an opportunity to focus as much on transactional or analytical activities in the payroll, across the payroll process. 25% of our participants indicate that they spend more than 50% of their time on day-to-day transactional activities. And then the fourth observation centers around challenges and payroll technology solutions. So when we look at challenges, for the last few years, we've really been measuring challenges in payroll, particularly from a system perspective, and integration and flexibility are the biggest challenges that we see for payroll. And again, that's regardless of the system, whether it's an ERP, a service bureau, or cloud technology. 46% of our participants listed integration and flexibility as the biggest challenge of their payroll solution. And the last thing is the future. When we talk about where we're going in the future from a payroll perspective, there's a lot of excitement and high expectations for cloud solutions in the payroll environment. And although a lot of payroll leaders are still learning about cloud technology, we found that of those payroll leaders that know about cloud technology, 56% of them believe cloud technology will bring needed flexibility, insight, and control to the payroll process. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the sourcing solutions. And when we look at sourcing, we're looking at sourcing from two perspectives. We're looking at gross to net, and we're also looking at other activities and sub-processes within the payroll process. So when we look at the profile for in-house and outsource, we see that most of the companies, in fact, in this performance study you'll see in a few minutes, I believe it's 64% of our participants indicate that they process payroll in-house. And just to kind of give you a little bit of the profile, for in-house processing, most of the participants are paying greater than or equal to 5,000 employees. 53% of them operate in a corporate environment. We have another 50% that outsource tax filing and payments. 46% use an ERP solution, and 69% indicate they have a medium to high level of customizations. When we look at the profile of those companies that outsource, we see most companies have less than 5,000 employees. 71% of them are in a corporate environment. 52% of them indicate that they're aligned under finance. We have 67% that indicate they use a best-of-breed solution, and then 47% of them indicate that they do have customizations, high to medium level of customizations in their outsourced solution. So some really interesting data. I know we get a lot of questions about, what's the threshold for in-house and outsourced processing. So we thought this was some really interesting information. And then we looked at each of the different processes and activities that are included in the payroll administration process. And we see selective outsourcing is common regardless of how you are processing your payroll. So when we hear of companies that process payroll in-house, more than likely they are outsourcing to a certain extent. And if we look at those activities that are being outsourced or processed in-house, you'll see that 93% of our participants process employee data maintenance in-house and really using self-service, employee self-service to enable that particular sub-process. We also see that most companies will handle their payroll inquiries in-house. 91% of the companies that participated indicated that their contact center, their employee contact center is handled in-house, and most of the time companies like to keep that employee experience near and dear to things that they can control. So we don't see it outsourced as much. In the gross to net process, you can see that 64% of our participants process in-house and another 36% outsource. For garnishment, we see 59% of our participants process garnishments in-house and 41% outsource it. And for garnishments, that's the administration. For pay statement distribution, 52% distribute pay statements internally, 48% outsource it. And then when we look at garnishment payments, 50% outsource and then 50% process in-house. So it's kind of 50-50. And then verification of employment, 47% of our participants perform the process in-house, and we also see 53% that outsource verification of employment. And then as far as check printing, which we hope that most companies are not doing a lot of, we see that 46% print their checks internally, and 54% outsource the check printing process. And then for W-2 processing, we see 43% will process W-2s internally compared to 57% that outsource that sub-process. And then when we look at tax filing and payment, you can see here that only 31% of companies will process their tax filing and payments, or they'll manage that process internally, and another 69% outsource the tax filing and payment process. And remember, as I said previously, this is one sub-process that is usually outsourced. Not only is it highly transactional, there are a lot of timelines and deadlines that must be met, and most companies are more comfortable having someone else do that, keeping in mind that even though it's outsourced, it does require a high level of internal control. The next thing I want to talk about is system characteristics. So as we begin to look at the data and we look across the different systems, I want to make sure that there are certain things that you understand. What we find is, and we've done several studies and surveys on payroll technology, and overall, we're finding that most people in the payroll profession are not overly excited about the current payroll platforms. However, most providers are developing new solutions, definitely trying to make the feeling and the excitement around payroll technology better. So we've seen in almost every category, as we start to look at the data, most participants indicate an average level of expectations and satisfaction. Basically, they understand the significance of technology, but their current experience really leaves a lot to be desired. And then the other thing that we're seeing is, as it relates to performance and satisfaction, there's not a lot of difference in the results for current payroll platforms. So everything basically looks the same, and everybody basically indicates that they're relatively, it's okay. It's not good, it's not bad, they're okay with technology. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to explain the different types of technology platforms that we're going to be looking at. And one is the service bureau. And we categorize service bureau as those companies that are using vendors like an ADP or Ceridian. And, obviously, that they can use these service bureaus in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's in-house processing. Sometimes it's different types of platforms. We didn't capture all the different types of platforms that were being used, but we did identify by the vendor. The next thing that we see is ERP solutions, and most of the participants in the study are using ERP solutions. And then the next category that we have is cloud technology. And as you guys know, cloud technology is new, particularly for payroll. There's a lot of conversation and excitement around cloud technology, but a lot of companies are just really moving into that space. So as we go through the data, we did share the results of our peer group. We call it the cloud peer group, I believe, throughout the study. But I also want you to know that just based on the number of users in general, that it is a small peer group. So it's a small group of companies. And as we do this study in the future, which we will be continuing to do this in the next few years, we expect that peer group to grow. So as we start to look at the data, almost 40% of our participants believe the level of agility in their current payroll platform is good, while more than 60% want more agility. And if you look at the chart here, 36% of our participants said as it relates to agility in my payroll system, it's good. We believe it's good. We can make changes. We can move based on the business needs, the internal business needs of my company. Another 46% said, it's okay. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just okay. And then we have 18% that indicated that as far from an agility perspective, as far as they're concerned, their system has really poor agility. So they can't adjust to internal business requirements as quick or as fast as they'd like to. And then you can see on the right-hand side when we look at the chart, we ranked the results by payroll platform. So you can see from a service bureau perspective, and also looking at the ERP perspective, and then the cloud solution again, which is a small peer group. So we look from a service bureau and an ERP perspective. We see that users are they're not overly excited about the level of agility. Almost 40% of ERP users are comfortable with the level of agility offered. And sometimes we say, with an ERP solution, it's an internal solution. So most of the time, we believe in theory that we should be able to customize and adjust the system as needed. But we're not really seeing a lot of that. We do see, when we look at cloud solutions, we do see that most companies have high expectations for cloud solutions, and at first glance, based on the participants in the study, 50%, when we speak of agility, indicate that they feel like their system has good agility, 40% believe it's average, and 10% believe the agility level is poor. So in general, from a payroll perspective, when we talk about agility, we still have a little bit of opportunity there. So the other thing we looked at is user experience. And when we looked at user experience, what we found that overall, most of our participants really had a 50-50 split in their user experience. 50% indicated they had a good user experience. 41% said it was okay. And 9% do not feel they have a good user experience. And as we look at the different types of payroll platforms, only 43% of participants that use an ERP solution believe the user experience is good, compared to 46% that indicate the user experience is average. So again, one of the things that you're going to see as we go through the results is no one's really overly excited about what they're using. From a cloud perspective, and again, small peer group, but we do have high expectations there, and most of the users, 80% of the users that are currently on cloud technology indicate they have a good user experience. Okay. And when we talked about features and functionality, it is definitely necessary to streamline and automate the payroll process. And what you'll see here is when we look at the overall data, so again, this is all platforms, 45% of our participants indicate that their system has good features and functionality. Another 46% said it's average, it's okay. And 9% were strong in saying that they have poor features and functionality in their system. And again, regardless of the solution, no one's overly excited. And in general, when you look at the different platforms, most everybody indicated that they had just an average level of excitement around the features and functionality. We do see with cloud solutions, 80% of the participants indicate that they have very good experience with the features and functionality of their system. And then when we started to talk about technology costs, what we found is only 38% of participants overall believe they have good technology costs, and good technology costs are generally lower technology costs in their current environment. We saw that 16% feel they have very high technology costs. And for more ERP systems, again, there's little excitement around technology. You'll see that 54% of ERP system participants indicated that they have an average experience. Service bureaus, it was 47%. And then when we look at cloud solutions, we have 40% that indicate they have an average experience, and 50% indicate they have a good technology cost experience. So again, when we talk about technology costs, when it's good, it means low. And when it's poor, it means you have high technology costs. And in everything that we do, everything that we talk about, technology costs is one of those areas that most companies are working really hard to reduce costs in technology, both from an implementation and also a maintenance and support perspective. And our data definitely spoke to the same thing that we're seeing in the market. So the other thing we asked is, how dependent are you on IT resources? And do you feel you have the right level of dependency on IT resources? And in general, 43% of the participants indicated that they feel like they have a good dependency level on IT resources. And also, when we looked at ERP systems, again, most were not overly excited. And most of the time with ERP systems, if you have a high level of customizations, you usually have a team to support the customizations, the upgrades, and the day-to-day maintenance. And you'll see here that 65% of our ERP participants indicated they had a so-so experience. Only 19% believe that the level of IT resources, the dependency on the level of IT resources is good. And then we had 16% that believe that they have a poor experience. Also, when we look at the service bureaus, and this is really what we should expect, because a lot of times those companies that outsource are outsourcing to service bureaus. So obviously, if you're outsourced, the scope and your outsource agreement is in line with expectations, you should not necessarily have a high dependency on IT resources, because you probably are outsourcing a lot of the work that you would need an IT system for internally. And that's in line with what we're seeing from service bureaus. We see 60% of our participants indicate that they don't feel like they're overly dependent on IT resources, compared to 20% that feel like they are a little bit more dependent on IT resources than they should be, particularly in an outsourced environment. So let's talk a little bit about productivity. And really in payroll, when we talk about productivity, we're focusing on simplification, standardization, and automation throughout the payroll process. And when we look at automation, we focus on business processes. And we looked at the difficulty. How difficult is it for organizations to automate their business processes in their current payroll solution? Only 23% of our participants indicated that it's easy to automate business processes. We had another 48% that indicated it's okay. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. We're not overly excited. And then we had 29%, which is pretty high, that indicate that it's difficult to automate business processes. So again, when we talk about productivity in payroll, if we don't have a certain level of automation, then we're probably doing those processes manual, and it definitely has a negative impact on our productivity. So when we look at the results on a payroll platform basis, we look at the service bureaus, we look at ERPs, and we look at cloud solutions, we do see that most people, when it comes to automating business processes, most people indicate that it's just okay. A small number of companies indicate it's easy. 7% that are using a service bureau, 23% that are using ERP systems. We do see a level of excitement, or higher level of excitement, when it comes to automation and capabilities for those that are using cloud solutions. One thing that I do have to say when we talk about automation of business processes, a lot of it has to do with your system, but there is an internal factor. Sometimes your internal culture, your internal environment is not necessarily conducive to automating your business processes. Sometimes there will be internal reasons that you have to have more complex business processes. And one of the things that we have to do as we look to reduce our IT costs and try to simplify our payroll solution and really let the solution work for us, we have to be able to have some type of influence internally to try to figure out what business processes are absolutely necessary and what business processes can easily be incorporated into the system. And then from a reporting perspective, we looked at the ease of creating ad hoc reports. So this is for not necessarily super users, but just your users in general. How easy is it for them to create ad hoc reports? And what we found is 25% of participants indicate that it's pretty difficult when we look overall. and then we saw 37% that indicate that it's easy, and then another 38% that are, it's just okay. And then when we looked at it by payroll solution, from a service bureau perspective, 40% of our participants indicate that it's difficult. And then we looked at it from an ERP perspective, and you'll see 38% indicate that it's easy. And then we have another 35% that indicate that it's okay. It's just average. And then again, when we look at the cloud solution participants, 40% of them indicate that it's easy, and 60% indicate it's okay. And then we also will notice here when we look at the level of difficulty, one thing that we did see here is that none of the people or the companies that are using cloud solutions today indicate that it's difficult to create ad hoc reports. So we thought that was promising and definitely in line with the excitement that we're starting to see around cloud solutions. And the next thing that we ask is how easy is it to configure security on your current solution? And what we saw is 38% of our participants indicate that it's easy, 39% says it's just okay, and then 23% indicate that it's difficult. And this is usually for most people or most companies, not a high level of security, just role-based security, something that you may have, one or two people focus on. And again, it still requires a certain level of knowledge, so to speak. And so when we look, we see by the different solutions, we see the service bureaus. Everybody's pretty much the same again, but we also see 26% difficulty, 30% indicate that it's easy, and again, 33% are right in the middle. When we looked at ERP systems, we see 31% indicate that as far as configuring security, it's relatively easy. We see another 42% that indicate it's, it's okay. It's not good, it's not bad. And then we see 27%, which is kind of high, actually, that indicate that security configuration is difficult. And then again, when we look at the cloud group, still, again, very new, so to speak, in a small group of companies that actually participated. We see 40% indicate that it's easy to configure security. We see another 40% that say it's okay, and we see 20% that indicate that it's difficult. So one of the things that we're seeing again is there's a lot of expectations around cloud solutions, and when we see 40% of the companies that are currently using the solution that indicate that it's relatively easy to configure security, some of those features and functionalities that we're looking at and that we're counting on, we're depending on getting a little bit easier, seem to be taking form in the early phases of companies using cloud solutions. One of the other things we want to think about is where we see the area of difficulty in those companies that are just average. Again, we have a small peer group, and we're not necessarily sure of how mature the companies are that participated. Some of them have been on their solution for a couple of years. Some of them are relatively new. So we have that learning curve that we have to consider as well. The next thing I want to talk about is the cost and FTEs. So we collected data around the cost of your current solutions, and while we weren't able to gather or to prepare or to share data for each solution, we were able to provide you data, and this is for the U.S. only, and just to show you the impact of technology over the total payroll cost. So let me explain just a couple of things. When we look at the technology costs that are included in your total payroll cost, technology cost represents 45% of the total payroll processing costs for those companies that process payroll in-house, but it only represents 9% when payroll is outsourced. And that's really what we expect. Now, as our solutions mature, we definitely expect to see technology in an in-house environment and an outsourced environment starting to be closer together. So you're not spending more on technology just because you're processing in-house. And some of the things that we looked at, when we look at our total cost, we are looking at our labor cost. We're also including outsourcing cost. we're including technology costs, and we're including overhead costs. So keep that in mind. And then again, what you'll see here is the technology cost is almost half of the total payroll cost when you're processing in-house. When we look at outsourcing, some of the things that we have to consider in order to make the cost apple to apples is there's all different types of outsourcing agreements. The scope of the process is being outsourced, and the activities outsourced will play a big role in the cost. And then from a technology perspective, as most of you know, we have varying systems out there, so the cost is a little bit different. The level of customizations varies from company to company. And also included in the cost, if you are upgrading your system or if you're doing an implementation, that's also included. And the overall level of an integration will also have an impact on your technology cost. When we look at FTEs, what we found is it takes 0.43 technical resources per 1,000 employees to support and maintain the payroll system, regardless of the platform. And that's your current payroll system today. Again, as we look to the future, one of the things that everybody's aiming to do is to lower the technology costs that we're currently experiencing today as it relates to the payroll system. Just to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we're facing in our current environment, again, as it relates to payroll systems. So we asked, what is your biggest challenge? And we've asked this question many times in many different surveys. And what we see always rising to the top is flexibility and integration. And they have long been the top challenges for payroll technology. And if you look here, you'll see that agility, most companies, 17% of companies, and these are, again, our overall numbers, indicated agility is a challenge. For some companies, 15%. Application support is a challenge. 2% indicated compliance is a challenge, and mostly, I will say, in the United States, most of the time, from a compliance perspective, our systems are pretty mature, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue for anybody. So I'm glad to see only 2%. And then cost, 8% indicate that cost is a challenge. And then when we talk about data control, 12% indicate that data control is a challenge. We have 23% that indicate flexibility, and then we have another 23% that indicate integration. And then if we look across the different platforms, you'll see regardless of the platform, for service bureaus, 29% indicated integration is the biggest challenge that they have. And then tied for second place is several different things: flexibility, data control, cost, and agility. And then when we look at ERP systems, you'll see that 28% indicate that flexibility is a challenge. And then the next thing is agility at 20%, followed by application support and application support, integration, and data control. And then for cloud solutions, we have basically the same thing, 22% indicating that flexibility is a challenge, and 44% indicating integration is a challenge. And when we talk about the cloud solution, and I know you've heard me say this, I want to just make sure, because we do have a lot of companies that are looking at cloud solutions. And then from the vendor perspective, almost all of the vendors in the payroll environment and the HR environment are in the process of developing, or they have developed cloud applications. So it's definitely a wave of the future. And we also have to take into consideration that a lot of the companies are really at the beginning, particularly from a payroll perspective. They just haven't been using the solutions a long time, and a lot of their results are probably based on their learning curve as well. And then we talk about integration. And for most companies, 73% indicate that the HRIS, the time reporting, and the accounting system are integrated with the payroll system. And usually when we talk about integration, it's not a problem for key systems, although 27% is pretty high, particularly keeping in mind that we're only talking about the United States, and we usually have better results in the United States. But What we do see is as we get down to some of the other systems that are important to the payroll process, like your variable compensation, your expense reimbursement, your equity administration, we don't have a lot of integration with those systems, and so that's where a lot of companies have issues and dissatisfaction with integration in their payroll system. It also leads to lower quality because, again, whenever you have to have manual processes in place, there's always that risk of errors. And while ERP systems have more integration than any other system when you look at the different types of platforms, most of the time it's really focusing on data movement. So moving data from one system to another. It's not necessarily including anything like workflow. And when we talk about workflow, we're looking at if an activity happens on one system, then it automatically updates the other systems, or the systems are talking back and forth. Again, a little bit more than just moving data. An example would be if you have in your recruiting system, if you have a candidate that you hire, the system recognizes when you hire that candidate, they become an employee, and it updates the HRIS system. It sends a message to the payroll system that this person needs federal and state tax information. They need direct deposit information. So those are some of the things that we are starting to see in newer solutions, and we definitely expect to see a lot more of in the future. And finally, the last thing I'll say here is when we talk about cloud solutions, and you'll see when we're talking about integrations, cloud solutions scored pretty well. 78% indicate that their system is integrated. Only 22% indicate the system is not integrated. But most of the time, the cloud solutions, regardless of who you're using, are centered around unified solutions, again, decreasing the concern around overall integration. And then looking at flexibility, as we look at flexibility, 42% of our participants indicate that they have good flexibility with their system, and then we have more than 50%, actually 58%, that indicate it's okay or it's poor. And specifically, in this case, when we talk about flexibility, 33% of our participants, again, this is overall, indicated that they had poor flexibility in their system. So it's always a concern. And then a lot of times when you're outsourcing, whether you're outsourcing or you're processing in-house, when it comes to payroll, depending on your workforce, you really want a system that will allow you to be flexible and be able to respond to whatever's going on internally. We want to make sure that we can pay our employees in a timely manner whenever possible. And actually, I shouldn't say whenever possible, I should say all the time. And then as you look at different solutions, and again, this is one of the challenges. So from, whether we're looking at a service bureau, an ERP, or cloud solution, there are still concerns around flexibility. I will say when we look at service bureaus, they are the least flexible, with 54% of our participants indicating that as far as it relates to flexibility, they feel like it's very poor. When we look at ERP systems, it's pretty even. 39% indicate it's good, 34% indicate it's okay, and 27% indicate they have a poor level of flexibility. And then when we look at cloud solutions, again, high expectations, 60% indicate that the level of flexibility is good, 10% indicate that it's average, and we have 30% that indicate that it's not as flexible, and they have a poor level of flexibility. Now, keeping in mind, as we look at all of these solutions, obviously the service bureau solutions and the ERP solutions have been around quite some time and are a lot more mature, so we have to take that into consideration when we're looking at the cloud solution, because these are the early adapters. And as you guys know, particularly in payroll, we want to make sure that we're comfortable and our employees are paid, accurately and timely. So we usually are not early adapters to new technology. We're usually right in the middle, and we're starting to see that with some of the data that I'll be showing you in a little bit. again, one of the biggest concerns we've always heard about service bureaus are the flexibility, and I've mentioned that. You can see 54% have poor flexibility. ERPs, again, is just from an ERP perspective, it's pretty much, there's not a big difference whether it's good, average, poor. It's kind of just right in the middle. And then again, just kind of keeping in line with the expectations that we have for cloud solutions. And I think it's exciting that 60%, even though the peer group is small, indicate that they have a high level of flexibility, which is definitely something that we are looking for in payroll. And then let's talk about the future a little bit. Basically, what does the future look like for the payroll administration process? And we're finding that payroll professionals are becoming much more knowledgeable around cloud technology. And we've been asking this question for the last few years, and we plan to continue to offer it until everybody is aware of cloud solutions, the advantages, and some of the challenges. But you can see here that we asked, what is your level of knowledge of cloud solutions? 14% indicated they had a high level of knowledge. 58% say it's okay, they know what it is at least. And we have 42% that indicates still that they have a low to no level of knowledge of cloud solutions, which is, as we look at this and just the fact that we've been tracking it for years, these numbers are still kind of small, but they are bigger than they have been. So we are seeing more and more people become interested and definitely trying to learn more about cloud solutions. We think a lot of that is driven by HR because HR seems to be moving to the cloud a lot quicker than payroll organizations. And as a result, we're having to learn because most of the time, in some cases, particularly if you're global, you may be selecting your own payroll solution or at least more involved in the process than we have been in the past when we were looking at an ERP solution or even outsourcing the service bureaus. Most payroll providers, as I mentioned before, are definitely exploring cloud technology. A lot of people believe that the cloud will fix a lot of the issues that we have, or at least address and make easier a lot of the issues that we're currently experiencing in payroll today. So as we talk about the cloud solutions, those payroll professionals that have good knowledge of cloud solutions have high expectations. They told us that in this survey. 56% believe cloud solutions will offer more flexibility, insight, and control. And if you look at the data from a service bureau perspective, not so much. 67% do not believe that. But from an ERP perspective, 67% of our ERP users that participated in the survey believe that it will offer, cloud solutions will offer more flexibility, insight, and control. And I kind of started on the payroll platforms here. I should have told you overall. You can see that 56% of participants believe that cloud solutions will offer flexibility, insight, and control. 44% do not believe that. Either they don't believe it or they don't necessarily know as much about the solutions that are available. So as we talk about movement to cloud technology, it is increasing, and I think this is very interesting, and it's really telling insight. Again, this is something that we've been tracking for the last couple of years, and now we see that 45% of companies in the survey plan to move to the cloud in the next 2 to 3 years. And then from a service bureau perspective, you can also see, I think it's quite interesting, that 56% of those that are currently using a service bureau are planning to move to the cloud in the next 2 to 3 years. Keeping in mind they don't have as much knowledge about it, and we're not exactly as excited about cloud technology, but they are planning to move in the next 2 to 3 years. I also thought it was interesting that 58% of ERP users are not planning to move in the next 2 to 3 years. 42% do plan to move in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think maybe perhaps And we've interviewed some companies. We are continuing to interview individual companies to get a little bit more insight around the data. But for some companies, it's going to be a little bit longer than 2 or 3 years because they are just making the decision. So the other thing when we talk about, what's important for payroll in the future is mobile technology. And when we talk about mobile functionality, it's clearly an area where there's lots of room for improvement, regardless of the sourcing or processing platform. And if we look at our data, 29% of our participants indicated that the current solution that they're using has good mobile functionality. And then we see 37% that indicate that it's okay, and we see another 34% that indicate that they have just really poor mobile functionality in their current solutions. And if you look at the individual platforms, you'll see that for most service bureaus, only 29% indicate that they have good mobile functionality, compared to 43% that indicate they have a good, it's okay, it's average. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just average. And keep in mind that most of the solutions are just starting to explore mobile functionality. And then 28% indicate that it's poor, so they don't necessarily have any mobile functionality. A lot of time with service bureaus, they're having to maybe even switch to a different solution to be able to take advantage of the new technology. And then ERPs, you can see 44% of those that are using an ERP system indicate that they have poor mobile functionality. Another 32% indicate that it's okay, and then 24% indicate it's good. And then when we look at the cloud solution, the one thing that we see is that no one indicates that they have poor mobile functionality. 50% indicate that it's good, and 50% indicate that it's average. Again, a small peer group, but I think mobile technology is definitely a major focus of most cloud solutions. Some are further than others, but it is being incorporated in the product. And again, you'll see on the different platforms, from an ERP perspective, I think they have the largest opportunity, and a lot of times it's an upgrade that will, or a new implementation that will make that functionality possible. And keep in mind, a lot of the ERP providers are also looking at cloud solutions. And then mobile devices are computers for most millennials, so that's something we definitely have to think about. And when we think about the need for mobile technology, it's not just about being able to enter your time and being able to do a couple of things. It's about time entry. It's about employee self-service. And again, keeping in mind that in some countries, and then in our younger generation, their mobile technology replaces a computer. So it's like you almost have to have it. You have to think about it. It has to be a part of your strategic initiatives. Companies that don't have ESS available outside the company firewall are really missing the point as it relates to ESS. And we say that because as we look at mobile technology, I also realize there still are quite a few companies that only have employee self-service available inside the firewall. So I've heard people say from that perspective, they're using our computers internally, so we don't have to think about it. But keep in mind, from a payroll perspective, we want to be able to work on more strategic initiatives, so we don't want to do as much transactional or data entry activities, and mobile functionality is going to be one of those things that's going to allow us, it's going to free us to work on those more strategic, more value-added activities. Okay. Just to summarize a couple of things, and I won't go through every single thing, but payroll leaders are anxiously awaiting enhanced technology capabilities that can move the payroll administration process to the next level. We talk about that, and we clearly saw that in the survey, and even, again, just in talking to people. I was at the APA last week and talking to people. no one's really overly excited about the technology that we have available. They are definitely, people are looking forward to the future. The future for some is really close. The future for others may be a little bit further away. And in general, payroll systems lack agility, limiting our ability to quickly respond to internal business needs. And again, 56% of those that have an understanding of cloud technology believe it will provide additional insight, flexibility, and control in payroll. 45% of companies are planning to move to cloud technology over the next 2 to 3 years. So I won't, again, didn't want to read through all of these, but I just wanted to give you just some of the key points. And this will be available for you at a later time. I will say just really quickly, for those of you that participated in the study, you will receive a handout that will show you the aggregate results of all of the participants, and we will also do a different presentation for those of you that participated, so you can expect to receive that information. At this point, what I'd like to do is open it up for Q&A, and I'm going to introduce Laurent Batella, who works for Workday. He's the Director of Payroll Product Strategy. Laurent?
Thank you, Felicia. So we got a few questions through the chat. So the first one is related to the demographic of the free platform that you've been the customers that you've been surveying, and when you say small peer groups for cloud, how small was that peer group by comparison to the other service bureau and ERP, for example?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So at the Hackett Group, when we label a small peer group, it would be any peer group that has less than 25 companies. So we really look for 25 or more companies than in order to do a peer group. And if it's less than that, we're going to label it a small peer group.
Okay, thank you. There's another question about a specific slide where you highlighted or outlined the technology cost in representing 45% of the total payroll processing cost. There was a chart. What's the cost? Is that payroll processing cost per FTE per year?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's per employee per year.
Okay. So the answer is yes. So this was a guess, a right guess. Moving forward, over the last few years, we've seen an increase in the quality of tax filing and payment being provided by external payroll vendors. And with that in mind, do you still see most companies continuing to outsource tax filing and payments?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so we realize that a lot of companies have had issues with tax filing and payments over the last couple of years. And even though there are issues, the vendors are working to get those issues resolved. And one of the things that I mentioned when we talked about tax filing and payments is just because you outsource it, it doesn't mean that you don't own it. You really do have to have tight controls internally. But it is something, because of the frequency, because of the risk, that companies still feel it's better outsourced than it is processed in-house.
Okay, thank you. Another question here, I'm not sure if you can answer that, but what would you say is the percentage of U.S. companies that have moved to cloud-based payroll? Open question.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. What would you say is the percentage of U.S.-based companies that have moved to cloud-based payroll solutions?
I really can't answer that question. I can tell you there were some of them that participated in the study, and I can also tell you that, based on the results of the study, that there are a lot that are looking to move to cloud technology, or they're at least evaluating or analyzing it. But as far as the percent of companies, I'm not the best person to tell you that. I don't know.
No, it's a tough question. I knew that. Can you explain, how cloud payroll solution reduce dependency on IT resources?
Yeah, sure. So Laurent, I may need some help from you on this, but basically, a lot of the things, if you're using an ERP system, a lot of the things that your resources are needed for, as far as managing customizations, managing tax updates and other system updates, and upgrading your system and just the day-to-day support, that would be something that would be done. It would be taken away from you, and it would be done by your provider. So they would do it one time for everyone that's using the solution, and that really frees you to focus less on the IT portion of your solution and just really working on the functionality and the other features that are beneficial to the payroll process.
Thank you. And then I think one last question here. What is included in the definition of the payroll process, and with any flavor on, ERP versus, cloud?
Sure. So when we talk about the payroll process at Hackett, we're including 6 different sub-processes, or 7 different sub-processes, and it's time reporting, it's employee data maintenance, it's payroll inquiry and response, payment calculation, payment distribution, tax filing and payments, and payroll accounting. And it only relates to payroll, again, because we're just looking at payroll. So when we talk about data maintenance, that's pretty much things like bank information, tax withholding, garnishments, anything related to payroll.
Okay, so I think I think at this time, I think we can wrap up the call. So thank you very much for your questions. Again, I think this session will be posted within 48 hours on the Workday website, correct? So back to the operator. Felicia, you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Again, thanks everyone for joining us today, and we will be sending out information for those of you that have participated in the performance study. And this information will be posted soon. Thanks, everyone.